Redshift here, doing my part to shift perceptions out of the pink and into the red. When I originally read the Dune books, I thought the whole Orange Catholic Bible thing was very implausible. But now I see how it's actually not so implausible. It's actually far more plausible than I thought. Just look at how Scientology and Mormonism and Falun Gong were created. They were religions that were created recently, and yet they were successful. Very successful. People become more corrupt as technology makes life more comfortable, or at least more hedonistic. And so people become less principled. And as people become less principled, it becomes the case that they just let themselves be swept along instead of being defiant, instead of thinking for themselves, instead of resisting tyranny, instead of standing up to women and telling women that they're wrong, etc. Look at how much the elites have been able to get young Christian women to think that homosexuality is not morally wrong. That is a huge change in just like 20, 25 years. Christianity used to view homosexuality as one of the gravest sins possible, and now lots of young Christian women view homosexuality as basically the equivalent of eating pork. That is something that used to be forbidden, but which is now no longer a big deal in God's eyes because of Jesus having done away with all that stuff. So as technology continues to make people more hedonistic, less principled, and as the elites make propaganda and brainwashing technology more and more advanced, it will become possible for the elites to brainwash people into believing that a new religion that is a compilation of all the previous religions, into believing in a new religion that is a compilation of all the previous religions with a new religious text and everything. They will be able to do that. All the elites have to do is keep flooding Europe and America and other racially homogenous countries with people of other races. Once the whole world, or nearly the whole world, is filled with tons of different people, once the whole world is filled with tons of people of different races, religions, etc., then there's no reason to have countries anymore, because all countries will be filled with a similar racial balance. That is, all countries will be multicultural. Africa will be filled with whites and Asians and Latinos. South America will be filled with blacks and Asians and whites, and Asia will be filled with whites and Latinos and blacks, etc. Then there's no point in having nations. And then there will be a major push to create a one-world government. And then once there's a one-world government, they will be able to make everybody learn the same language, like everyone learning Esperanto or Spanish or Chinese or English or a new made-up politically correct language that is a real version of Newspeak. Then once everyone speaks the same language and there's a one-world government, the result will be a homogenization of culture, even more than already exists. An increased ease in brainwashing the public, and then it will be easy to create a new religion and grow it, and then the government could give it preferential treatment, such as requiring all religions to pay taxes on the donations that these religions receive, except for the new religion, which does not have to pay taxes on the donations it receives. This would help the new religion grow much faster, and evolve much faster, and then the new generations would grow up with that religion. And if the government staffed that new religion with, now, intelligence agents or other agents who are very, smart and who can very effectively use the religion to help people build communities in not only a way that will be very financially beneficial to those believers in that religion, but in a way that will also serve the elites as goal in terms of the evolution of humanity. So since that new religion will help people financially succeed and take care of themselves, it would become very popular with people. And then adherents to the religion might not believe it that much, but they might not actually believe the religion that much, but, or they might just become members of that religion just for the improvements of standard of living that it would help the people achieve, right? And then those members of that religion, their own kids would grow up in the church, and they would believe it much more because they grew up in that religion. And then they would become much more faithful, zealous, credulous members of the church. And then the church would grow in power once it was truly believed in by most of its members. And then, eventually the old members who didn't really believe it at first because it was new to them, they would, because they were closer to the time at which it was created, out of whole cloth, but then all those people would die off eventually, and then only the young people who believe in it still would exist. And then everyone would truly believe the new religion, right? Everyone in the world speaking the same language would make it much easier to institute a new world religion, a new fabricated religion created from scratch or out of an amalgamation of the past religions. And as time went by, the older people who spoke any language other than the one world language would be dying off more and more, and the people who believed the older religions like Christianity, Islam, etc. would be dying off. And then after a mere 1 to 200 years of the existence of the new world language, the new one world language and the one world religion, there would be only speakers of that one language, and there would only be believers in that one new religion. Or mainly, even if there were people who still believed other religions, they'd be very few, right? And the government could increase this by, making it so financially oppressive on other religions through taxes and not taxing the new religion that, the government, assisted in creating or created all on its own, then this would mean that it's going to be a case where like everybody's going to become a member of that new religion just for the financial benefits that come along with it, right? Like being able to, and that religion could much more easily create like cheap housing and all the rest of it, kind of like my communes idea. It could do that kind of thing much easier because of it not having to pay taxes to the government that all the other religions do have to pay taxes, right? So then the other governments would not be able to easily take care of their people. The other religions would not be as easily able to take care of their people, so therefore they would not grow. They would shrink in size, and then the new religion would grow in size. And eventually, yeah, sure, there'd be a few people here and there who'd be members of the old religions, but mainly it would just be like 99 or 95 or most percent of the population, like almost everybody who's religious would be a member of this new religion, right? And they'd make it more secular and more scientific and more philosophical so that it had utility to people, so that they would actually like being members of that religion, because following the principles of that religion would make their lives happier than if they were just atheists or agnostics or materialists. You know what I mean? So, yeah, pretty much everybody at that point would just be, in 100 to 200 years after the creation of that new religion, pretty much everybody would be believers in that new religion. And they'd all speak the same language probably too. The government could also tax not just the donations to other religions, but could also tax the people who are believers in other religions, right? People are like a higher income tax for those, like tax the religious donations to the church of like, the Buddhist church or the Christian church or the Islamic church, but like also tax the Christians and the Buddhists and the Muslims, like higher income tax as well. So doubly tax anybody who's not a member of the new religion, right? And then that would incentivize even more people to become members of the new religion, right? People are pussies these days, and if people continue being cowards, then they will even tolerate having to pay higher taxes if they're Christian or Baha'i or Falun Gong or Buddhist or Hindu, and then people of all religions will have to pay a tax for being that religion. While the people who are believers in the new one world religion would not have to pay that particular tax, and would therefore have more money, and would therefore be more able to have more children, and would thus also slowly breed the people who believe in other religions out of existence. And the longer the new universal language exists, and the longer the new universal religion existed, the more those two things would evolve and meld with the culture, and with people's experience and people's worldviews, and then those religions will become less and less fake as time goes by, because human experience is real. And so whatever assists you in living your life will become real to you, and to other people who also see the world through that lens that you see it through that emotional conduit. If you believe something intellectually, if you just believe something in an intellectual way but not in an emotional way, that can be a sterile thing, right? But if you believe something emotionally and use that belief to guide your actions and your experiences and to shape your worldview and such, then that belief is no longer sterile, but is a living thing, a lived experience, a set of memories, a tool that one uses to live a happier life, etc. And then that religion is no longer fake, but is real, even though that religion was originally fabricated by human beings, designed by human beings in order to control the bottom 99% of people. The government and the corporations are getting better and better at using psychology, mythology, subliminal advertising, and other such things in order to convince people of things. So lies, propaganda. So in 50 to 100 years, that technology of manipulation will be even more advanced, and it will become much easier to convince people to believe in the new made-up religion, because of how advanced propaganda and manipulation and brainwashing will be. Especially since young people are the most impressionable and also the most likely to be closely acquainted with technology and how it works and what the newest forms of technology are, the newest websites, how to use cryptocurrency, etc. And so those young people will be most likely to use the new technology, the new philosophical techniques, and also the new technology, the internet and whatever the internet evolves into, and will get brainwashed by the new forms of manipulation used by the elites through that technological form, thus making it so that the most vulnerable members of the society are brainwashed the quickest and most effectively, thereby making it so that they become members of the new religion very quickly, the young people do. And then their kids will be born into it, and then it will sustain itself and grow quickly. And you may think that the Supreme Court would never allow one religion to be favored over other religions, but look at how it declared civil asset forfeiture and Obamacare to be legal, even though those are both blatantly unconstitutional. And also remember that I'm talking about a one-world government being instituted after a one-world language is instituted. And the one-world language will itself only be instituted after a one-world government is created. this one world religion might be 400 years away, because it might take 100 years before we have a one world government. And it might even take longer than 100 years. And then who knows after that how long it'll take the one world language to be created and widespread, right? That might take another few decades or even longer, right? And then only when the one world language is universally used could the one world religion be created. And then the one world religion would itself take a few decades, maybe even 1 to 200 years before it become extremely widespread. So it may take a long time for a new fabricated one world religion to become universal over the whole world. But it is entirely possible for it to happen. And while you might think that it does not matter because it's so far in the future, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it could be a reality way sooner than 400 years. Maybe we could have a one world religion in 100 years or 80 years. Who knows? It could be possible. I mean, just look at how much the world has changed over the last 80 years. Computers to the internet to cryptocurrency. I mean, dear God, look at how much the world has changed in just the last 50 years. It's insane. Or the last 70 years, right? Maybe it could be made a reality in 100 years, in which case your great-grandchildren will be alive to see it. And just because something is far in the future does not mean that we should not be worried about it. We owe the people of the far future just as much consideration as we owe the people of the next generation. And like I was implying before, there can be profundity in your experience of following the principles of a fake religion, but that doesn't mean that the religion is actually objectively real. But it feels real to you because it helped you in your experiences, and it helped you develop an epiphany about life. And this is why feelings are not a good path through life. They're not a good way of measuring truth. Feelings are not. And this is why men should be listened to more than women. Why men's way of viewing the world is more valid than women's way of viewing the world. Because, men are more logic-based and women are more feelings-based, more experience-based. Just because a religion is real to you does not mean that it is objectively real. And regarding the elites creating a new one-world language, they can make it easier to create a one-world language by dumbing everyone down, and by importing tons of Latinos into the US, and then these Latinos try to learn English, but they can only learn a crappy version of English. They'll be speaking pidgin English, and their kids might speak English decently, but not completely fluently, because their kids will also know Spanish. And it's harder to know two languages fluently, even if you grow up with both of them. Only people with above-average memories can learn two languages fluently, even by growing up with them. And not just Latinos, but other things as well. You got other people as well. You got Chinese immigrants speaking their crappy form of English. That would probably happen in the future, as China takes over the world. You get tons of Chinese moving to the US, and they'll be speaking a crappy form of English, and you got the Latinos speaking a crappy form of English, and all the rest of it, right? You'll get Middle Eastern immigrants speaking a different form of crappy English. You'll get all these other immigrants speaking all these crappy, different kinds of crappy English, which are, each different from each other because their native languages are different, so their pidgin English is all very different, right? And so if a very large percentage of America is speaking pidgin English, like 30% or something, and the younger generations of white Americans are also speaking crappy English because of the destructive effect on language that texting is having. And another thing, if this happens, this will greatly destroy the language capabilities of all Americans, right? It will make young white Americans speak crappy English in the future, because of another thing that will make white Americans speak crappy English in the future, at least young white Americans, is the increasing ghettoification of America. Whites speaking the crappy English that blacks speak. This is also going to continue to decrease the facility that whites have with language. And so even the young Americans who should be fluent in English will be speaking worse English than they would otherwise be speaking, and then they are capable of speaking. Right? They'll be capable of speaking good English, because it's not like they're retards or anything, but they'll be speaking crappy English because that's what everyone around them is speaking. And so all this crappy English speaking will also make it so that the elites will be able to claim that we're a multiracial, multicultural country, and English is just too difficult of a language to learn. We need a new language for everyone, a simpler language. It's sexist and racist to keep using Old English. We need to use a new language, a non-sexist, non-racist, non-colonialist language that everyone can speak easily, which is simple and doesn't discriminate against low IQ individuals, and which is not biased against women or minorities. They'll say something like that, and then they'll be able to introduce a new language to unify everyone. Whether it's a new, simpler form of English, or whether it's a new, simple form of Chinese, or whether it's Esperanto, or whether it's something else. And the new language will be designed to be politically correct and easy to speak, and it will be governmentally controlled. And while you may think that it's impossible to control what people say, not even with violence, I will point out that unless a bunch of defiant people are all living together, there will be no defiant examples set by people, and no one will be learning other people's as defiant new words unsanctioned by the government, because any new words newly created without government approval will be censored. And so preventing a new language, a real new life newspeak, preventing a real life newspeak from taking over is only going to be possible if we keep free speech alive on the internet. Absolute free speech. Because if government gets total control of the internet and increases the censorship they're already doing, and do so everywhere on the internet, at least the places of the net that the people in your country can access without being a tech expert like Zeitgeist Eater, well then if the government gets this level of control, this level of censorship, then all mentions of new words will be censored instantly, scrubbed instantly, shadow banned instantly, and the result will be that the official politically correct version of the new one world language will be the only version that anyone will know about, and thus the only version that anyone will speak. Maybe the elites will dumb down English, or maybe they'll use Esperanto or dumb down Mandarin, and the smarter people in America will learn English and Mandarin. And the bottom 99% of the country will only learn the dumbed down version of Mandarin and will not learn English. That way America will be more compatible with China, and yet the US government will still be able to control the words and thoughts of Americans by having its own different, simple, government-controlled version of Mandarin. The elites might even be able to use the desperation of Americans once the economic crash hits to force Americans to want their kids to learn the language, Esperanto or dumbed down Mandarin or whatever, because if the government and the corporations could convince Americans that their only hope for the future is to get their kids to learn this new version of Mandarin instead of English, then Americans would happily let their kids learn all their elementary and high school and junior high classes in the new dumbed down version of Mandarin. You know, like they would be taught American history and math and English. Well, maybe not English, but they'd learn all their classes. You know, science, biology and physics. They'd take all their classes in this dumbed down version of Mandarin, right? And then the kids would probably know more Mandarin than English. This would be enjoyed by the kids because the language would separate them from their parents. And kids are embarrassed by their parents and self-segregate themselves from their parents anyway. And learning all their classes in a new language would separate them more, and the kids would enjoy that, probably. And this would also widen the gulf between parents and kids, and would also further decrease parents' influence over their own kids. And this would further destroy the nuclear family, and would make it easier for the government and the multinational corporations to take the place of the parents, of family. And then the power of the propaganda and brainwashing would become even stronger. Kids would view, the government as their father, and their mother, and then when they get older, they still view the government as their parents, and then they're much more willing to accept the government outlawing procreation without a government license, and then the government gets to control procreation too. My main insight that spurred the creation of this video, or at least the second part of the video, is the insight that, because this was actually like 2 short videos that I put in, 2 short insights, well not that short, but 2 different insights that I put into my voice recorder, and I merged them into one video because they're very related. Right? My main insight that spurred the creation of this, at least the second half of this video, is the insight that importing lots of Latinos into the country will create more people speaking pidgin English, and that this will degrade English even further, and this will make it easier for the elites to institute a real-life form of newspeak. The elites have been following the playbook of 1984, the George Orwell novel. They've been using 1984 as a blueprint for decades now, and so there's no reason to think that they won't try to institute a real-life version of newspeak. They've actually already tried to put Esperanto into some schools in the US, but parents objected, and so they stopped teaching kids Esperanto. But as soon as the country becomes liberal enough and desperate enough, they will be able to institute Esperanto, or a simplified form of English, or a simplified form of Mandarin as the new universal language for the entire country of America. And that will be the new real-life newspeak. Not to imply that I have anything against Esperanto, I don't. I think Esperanto is cool and is a great and noble invention created for a benevolent purpose by the guy who created it, and I wish that Esperanto had caught on sooner, but if Esperanto is used as a tool of controlling the people, then I am opposed to it being used in that way. But perhaps it'd be a good thing if a one-world language were instituted, because people create new words constantly. It might prove impossible for the elites to prevent new words from entering the language, and while they could perhaps prevent those new words from being used online, they could probably not prevent people from using those words at home. At least if people keep listening devices out of their homes, devices that listen to one's words and then report those words to the police, like the Echo and other such devices do. But people are already accepting those listening devices, which can already listen and then call the cops if you say things that seem threatening or potentially dangerous, like someone talking about killing people or something. And if men are genetically engineered from conception, that is against their will to be obedient and submissive, then these men might stomp out kids' tendency to create new words. Those parents might teach their children from a very young age that the creation of new words is wrong and evil and dangerous. But if such genetically engineered obedience can be avoided, and if people can keep listening devices out of their homes, or if people all start living on communes that use technology but greatly restrict its use, especially with women, restrict women's use of technology, and if those communes also insist on breeding only the old-fashioned way, so that those people do not get genetically engineered to be obedient and submissive, without their consent, and those kids being genetically engineered that way against their will, against those parents' will, without their knowledge. If they keep breeding the old-fashioned way so that they don't get genetically engineered to be obedient and submissive, then those people will continue to invent new words, rebellious words, subversive words. And if everyone uses the same language, and those subversive words catch on, then the elites might find it impossible to control the language because of so many people creating so many new words, subversive words, rebellious words, words drawing distinctions that the elites don't want drawn. So if we get a one-world language, but then it proves impossible to control, then it could unify the world and make it so that the entire mass of humanity can cohesively oppose the tyranny of the elites by spreading the word through use of new subversive words created by people. Words not in the official dictionary of that Newspeak language. So maybe the creation of a real-life Newspeak will backfire on the elites. So maybe a one-world language would actually backfire on the elites, and that would be a good thing. But I don't think that we can trust that it will backfire, and so we need to oppose any and all attempts to create a one-world language. Or we need to create our own one-world language and start using that and not let the government censor it at all or control it at all. Now, if we abolish all governments and anarcho-capitalism arises and everyone is incredibly free, prosperous, empowered, etc., and there's little or no tyranny, then we can allow the creation of a language that everyone uses. But until we are totally free, we have to assume that any creation of a new language will only enslave us further, and thus we have to oppose it. And there's really probably no need for a real one-world language other than tyranny control purposes, right? Like, I don't really necessarily think there is a real need for one world language because soon, all cell phones, all little computers that people carry around in their pocket are going to have a super, super advanced artificial intelligence in it that can translate on the fly any language into an exact, perfect, or almost perfect translation into your language, And even idioms will be able to be compared to, another idiom in your language that means the same thing or whatever, So like, idioms will be perfectly translated. All the rest of it will be literally translated, right? Like, everybody will have a really powerful artificial intelligence, not like real artificial intelligence that's like, sentient, but like artificial intelligence to where it's like super advanced programming to where it can, decipher exactly what's being said by the other person, whether they're speaking Chinese, Cantonese or Mandarin, or whether they're speaking, whatever they speak in Indonesia, or whether they're speaking Japanese or Hindi, or whether they're speaking Russian or, Slovenian, whatever language anyone comes up to you and starts speaking to you, you just, pull out your phone and you look at the screen and your little phone translates it for you in real time and is showing you exactly what the other person's saying. And then when you talk, they look at their phone and they see exactly what you're saying, and then you can have a conversation with anybody, no matter what language they're speaking, right? And so that is going to make it so that translators are totally, all translators will be put out of work. There would be no need for any human translators anymore. There would be no need for any borders anymore, really. There would be no need for, any kind of, people learning more than one language. Everybody will just keep their language that they learned from their parents, and then they'll just talk to everybody else through a translator, right? So, and maybe then people will get along with each other and will congregate in cities or communes or whatever, or in little areas, states or countries, according to like belief systems and morality rather than language. Because, it's much better if you have, like a Christian community filled with like Chinese speaking people and Hindis and all these other people that speak your language. I mean, don't speak your language, but they all believe in your same religion and they have the same values as you and the same political views as you and all that, right? Because then you just all talk to each other through your phones, right? And maybe you all develop some kind of pidgin English or pidgin Chinese or pidgin Hindi or whatever, to where you can all communicate without the translator. Although the translator will be so good and so fast, and it's so easy to read. Everybody can read that. Read in their own language. That is, it'll be like, why would you even want to speak a pidgin form of English or Hindi or Chinese to communicate with other people when you could just use their translator on your phone? It's much better, right? So everybody will be able to talk to each other through translators, and that'll make it much, much easier, right? As long as you're all getting along, and you're living in the same area, and you're doing your part of the work, and you are all under the same rules, and you're all adhering to the same rules, it really doesn't matter whether you can talk to other people or not. Even if you didn't have a translator, as long as you, like, the translator would just be for purposes of, like, when you need to talk to other people, but you really would not need to talk to other people, right? And there's always going to be, like, if it's a big group at least, like, let's say it's a commune of, like, 10,000 people, and, like, maybe a third of them are Chinese, a third of them are Muslim and speak Arabic, and the Chinese ones speak, Mandarin or Cantonese, and then there's, like, a third Latino, and they speak only Spanish, and then there's, like, well, or not a third, let's say, like, a quarter, a fifth, or whatever, like, a quarter Chinese, a quarter Muslim, a quarter Spanish, a quarter white, right? And everybody speaks only one language, right? The Muslims speak, Arabic, and the Chinese speak Cantonese or Mandarin, and the Latinos speak Spanish, and then the whites speak English, right? If it's a 10,000 person commune, that means there's 2,000, and it's equally divided among those people, but they all have the same moral beliefs, and they all have the same political beliefs, or ways of running the commune type of beliefs. Well, then everybody just does their own thing, and then, if you want to talk to people, you want to make friends, you want to have a girlfriend or a wife or that kind of thing, then you just, you find someone from your own group, the 2,500 people. If it's a 10,000 person commune and there's 2,500 people of your own race, or not even necessarily your own race, but like your own language and stuff, then you just find a girlfriend of your own language. You find friends of your own language, and then you're not against the other people because they all have the same beliefs as you. You just don't talk to them very often because you'd have to use a phone as an intermediary. You know what I mean? So there's really no need to, interact with people who speak other languages, right? As long as they have the same beliefs as you, because then there's no conflict. You really only need to communicate when there's conflict, or communicate for enjoyment, right? But if there's a bunch of people who do speak your language in this commune or whatever, then you can just talk to them for fun, and you can just find a girlfriend among them, and find a wife among them. So there's really no need for a one world language whatsoever, especially since translator programs on phones are going to get really, really sophisticated in the future. In the next, let's say, 20 or 30 years, it's going to be incredibly powerful, your phone. And it's going to be mind-blowingly powerful, and there will never be a need for anyone to ever learn another language again. Everybody will just speak one language, the language they grew up with, and that's it. And like I said, people will probably congregate more according to moral beliefs and political beliefs, or whatever, rather than, just speaking the same language, right? And then if there are countries in the future, then because of that, they will be countries that will be people who all believe the same thing. So then there will be none of these problems of, like, half the country is liberal and half the country is conservative, right? Or like a quarter of the country speaks Spanish and barely speaks English, right? None of these problems will arise because people will all speak the same language. People all speak different languages, but everybody will be able to communicate through their phone with the people who don't speak the same language, but they all do share the same political and moral beliefs. And if they change their political or moral beliefs, they'll go live in another country that has the same beliefs as their new beliefs, right? So everybody will be cohesive, that everybody will believe the same thing, so the government, or if there is one or whatever, things will be run in a way that works for, 99% of the people in that country, if there are countries at that time. So then things will be that way more in the future, probably. And that would be much, 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 much better than a one-world government and a one-world religion and a one-world language and newspeak and the government controlling the language and not letting you create any new words. And you know what I'm saying? It would just be way, 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 way better. Freedom is always better. Always, always, always better. It's been Redshift. Hit the thumbs up button if you like this video. Hit the thumbs down button if you didn't. Peace trucks.